The emergency beacon cut through the darkness of space like a scream. Its distress signal bounced off asteroid fields and dead planets, traveling faster than light through quantum relay stations scattered across the galaxy. The message was simple but desperate: Mayday, Mayday. This is the civilian transport vessel Serenity's Hope. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. 300 passengers aboard, including children. Coordinates follow. Anyone who receives this, please help us. Commander Sarah Chen sat in the command chair of the UES Retribution, the flagship of humanity's Third Fleet. Her dark eyes scanned the holographic display that showed the distress call's origin point. The bridge around her hummed with quiet efficiency as her crew worked at their stations. The Retribution was a massive dreadnought, its hull scarred from countless battles but still deadly as the day it was launched. "Ma'am, we're picking up that civilian distress call," reported Lieutenant Martinez from the communications station. "It's coming from the Kepler Nebula, about 6 light-years from our current position." Chen frowned. The Kepler Nebula was technically neutral space, but it bordered the territory of several hostile alien species. Civilian ships rarely traveled through that region unless they were desperate or foolish. "Any other ships responding to the call?" "Negative, ma'am. We seem to be the only ones in range." The commander stood and walked to the tactical display. The Third Fleet consisted of 12 ships, including her dreadnought, 4 heavy cruisers, 5 destroyers, and 2 support vessels. They were returning from a patrol mission along the outer rim when the distress call reached them. "Distance and travel time?" "At maximum warp, we can reach them in 47 minutes, answered the navigation officer. Chen nodded. 47 minutes might be too long if the civilian ship was under active attack. She had to make a decision quickly. The Third Fleet had a reputation throughout the galaxy, and it wasn't always a good one. Other species called them humanity's deadliest fleet for a reason. They had fought in more battles and destroyed more enemy ships than any other human naval unit. "Set course for the Kepler Nebula, maximum warp," she ordered. "Signal the fleet to follow. And send a message to the distressed vessel. Tell them help is coming." As the fleet changed course, Chen couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Something about this situation felt wrong. Civilian ships avoided the nebula for good reason. The area was known for pirates, hostile aliens, and, worse. What had driven the Serenity's Hope to take such a dangerous route? The answer came 20 minutes into their journey when long-range sensors detected something alarming. "Commander," called out Ensign Brooks from the sensor station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures near the distress call location. Multiple ships, unknown configuration." "How many?" Chen asked. "At least 15, ma'am. Possibly more. The nebula's interference is making it hard to get exact numbers." Chen's jaw tightened. 15 hostile ships was a significant force. The Third Fleet had faced worse odds before, but never while trying to protect civilians. "Any word from the Serenity's Hope?" "Nothing for the past 10 minutes, ma'am." The silence could mean many things, none of them good. Chen walked back to her command chair, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. The Kepler Nebula would provide cover for both sides, but it would also limit sensor effectiveness and communication. A battle in that environment would be chaotic and deadly. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Martinez spoke up again, "I'm receiving transmissions from the unknown ships. They're speaking in what sounds like Vraken." Chen's blood ran cold. The Vraken were one of the most aggressive species in known space. They were tall, reptilian creatures with a culture built around conquest and slavery. Humanity had fought several wars with them over the past 50 years, each conflict bloodier than the last. If the Vraken had captured the civilian ship, the passengers were facing a fate worse than death. "Can you translate the messages?" "Working on it, ma'am. The universal translator is having trouble with their dialect, but I think they're discussing something about fresh meat and new slaves for the breeding pits." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of engines and computers. Every crew member knew what those words meant. The Vraken were notorious for capturing humans and other species for their slave markets. Men were worked to death in mines and factories. Women and children faced even worse fates. Chen stood up slowly, her face hard as stone. "Signal the fleet. We're going to battle stations. When we reach the nebula, we go in fast and we hit them hard. No mercy, no prisoners." Ma'am, her executive officer, Commander Williams, stepped forward. The odds are against us. 15 Vraken ships could include heavy cruisers or even a battleship. We might want to call for reinforcements. There's no time, Chen replied. By the time reinforcements arrive, those civilians will be dead or worse. We're going in. Williams nodded grimly. He had served under Chen for 3 years and knew better than to argue when she had that look in her eyes. Understood, ma'am. I'll coordinate with the other ships. As the fleet prepared for battle, Chen thought about the hundreds of civilians depending on them. The Serenity's Hope was a passenger liner, not a military vessel. It would have minimal defenses against even one Vraken warship, let alone 15. The crew and passengers were probably terrified, huddled together in whatever safe spaces they could find while their ship was torn apart around them. Commander, Ensign Brooks called out, "We're approaching the nebula's edge. Dropping out of warp in 30 seconds. Chen gripped the armrests of her command chair. All ships, this is retribution. Remember, our primary objective is to rescue the civilians. Everything else is secondary. Stay in formation and watch your six. These lizards are cunning." The main screen showed the swirling purple and gold clouds of the Kepler Nebula growing larger. The nebula was beautiful but deadly, filled with radiation and gravitational anomalies that could crush a ship in seconds. It was the perfect place for an ambush. "Dropping out of warp, now," announced the helmsman. The stars stopped streaking past the viewports and returned to normal points of light. Immediately, the ship's sensors began working to penetrate the nebula's interference. What they found made everyone on the bridge suck in their breath. The Serenity's Hope hung dead in space, its hull breached in multiple places and debris floating around it like a funeral shroud. Vraken ships surrounded the civilian vessel like vultures around a corpse. They were massive, dark ships with angular designs and weapon ports glowing red. As the human fleet watched, a Vraken boarding shuttle detached from one of the warships and headed toward the passenger liner. "They're still boarding," Chen observed. "That means there are still people alive over there. Tactical, I want firing solutions on all hostile vessels. Communications, try to raise the Serenity's Hope." The tactical officer's fingers flew over his controls. "Targeting systems online. I count 16 Vraken ships total. Mix of cruisers and destroyers, plus what looks like a command ship." "Ma'am," the communications officer interrupted, "I'm getting a weak signal from the civilian ship. It's barely coming through. Put it on speaker." Static filled the bridge, then a voice came through, weak and terrified. "This is Captain Morrison of the Serenity's Hope. Is anyone out there? The lizards have boarded us. They've taken most of the passengers. We're hiding in the engine room with maybe 50 people. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. They're killing anyone who resists." Chen's hands clenched into fists. She had heard enough. "All ships, attack formation Delta 7. Target their engines first, then weapons. We need to disable them before they can escape with the prisoners." "Ma'am," Commander Williams said quietly, "some of those Vraken ships are significantly larger than ours. We could lose half the fleet in this engagement." Chen turned to look at him, her eyes burning with cold fury. "Commander, those are our people over there. Humans. Families. Children. I don't care if there are 100 Vraken ships waiting for us. We're going to get them back." The executive officer nodded slowly. He had never seen the commander this determined before, and, frankly, it was a little frightening. But he also understood. The Third Fleet had been called humanity's deadliest for a reason, and that reason was about to become very clear to the Vraken. "All ships report ready for battle," the tactical officer announced. Chen sat back in her command chair and stared at the enemy formation on the main screen. The Vraken had superior numbers and possibly superior firepower, but they had made one critical mistake. They had attacked humans. More specifically, they had attacked defenseless humans. And now they were about to learn why humanity's Third Fleet had earned its deadly reputation. "Signal all ships," she said quietly. "Tell them this is for every human those monsters have ever taken. Today, we show them what happens when you mess with our people." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all knew they were about to enter one of the most dangerous battles of their careers. But they also knew they were doing it for the right reasons. Somewhere in the wreckage ahead, human civilians were counting on them. They would not let them down. All ships acknowledge and are standing by for your order, ma'am, reported the communications officer. Chen took a deep breath and leaned forward in her chair. The moment had come. Time to show the Vraken why humanity had survived every challenge the galaxy had thrown at them. Time to demonstrate why the Third Fleet was feared across known space. All ships, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the bridge and, to every vessel in her fleet, engage the enemy. The space around the Kepler Nebula erupted into chaos as the human Third Fleet launched their attack. The Retribution led the charge, its massive railguns spitting streams of hypervelocity projectiles at the nearest Vraken cruiser. The alien ship's shields flared bright blue as the projectile struck, but the human weapons were designed specifically to penetrate Vraken defenses. Direct hit on the lead cruiser, reported the tactical officer. Their forward shields are down to 60%. Keep firing, Chen ordered. All ships, focus your attacks on their engine sections. We can't let them escape with those prisoners. The Vraken fleet reacted quickly to the human assault. Their ships turned toward the attacking force, their own weapons charging with ominous red light. The alien vessels were sleek and predatory, built for speed and devastating surprise attacks. Their plasma cannons could melt through most ship hulls in seconds. Incoming plasma torpedoes, warned the sensor operator. Impact in 15 seconds. Evasive maneuvers, Chen commanded. Launch countermeasures. The Retribution rolled hard to starboard as defensive systems activated. Brilliant flares shot out from the ship's hull, designed to confuse the guidance systems of incoming missiles. Most of the plasma torpedoes veered off course, but two struck the ship's port shields. The bridge shook violently as energy cascaded across the defensive barriers. Shield strength down to 85%, reported the engineering station. All systems nominal. Around them, the battle intensified. The human destroyers Phoenix and Valkyrie worked in tandem, using their superior speed to flank a Vraken heavy cruiser. Their particle beam arrays carved deep wounds into the alien ship's hull, causing internal explosions that lit up the nebula with orange fire. But the Vraken were fighting back with the fury of cornered predators. A concentrated barrage from 3 enemy ships overwhelmed the shields of the human cruiser defender. Plasma bolts tore through its armor plating, and atmosphere vented from multiple hull breaches. Defender is taking heavy damage, the communications officer reported. Captain Rodriguez is requesting assistance. Chen's mind raced as she evaluated the tactical situation. The battle was not going as smoothly as she had hoped. The Vraken ships were more heavily armed than intelligence reports had suggested, and their crews were fighting with desperate cunning. Thunderbolt and Interceptor, break off your current attack and support the defender, she ordered. Everyone else, maintain pressure on the main formation. As the human ships repositioned, something unexpected happened. The largest Vraken vessel, which had been hanging back from the main fight, began moving toward the damaged civilian liner. It was a command ship, easily twice the size of any human vessel in the fleet. The Vraken flagship is moving toward the Serenity's Hope, the tactical officer announced. I think they're preparing to take the ship and remaining prisoners with them. Chen cursed under her breath. If the Vraken managed to capture the civilian vessel and jump to hyperspace, the rescued passengers would disappear into the alien slave markets forever. She could not let that happen. Helm, set an intercept course for that command ship. Maximum acceleration. Ma'am, that will take us away from the main battle, Commander Williams pointed out. The other ships will be outnumbered. I'm counting on our people to handle themselves, Chen replied. We cannot let that command ship escape with those civilians. The Retribution changed course, its massive engines pushing the dreadnought toward the enemy flagship at dangerous speeds. The nebula's gas clouds swirled around them as they accelerated, creating a surreal backdrop for the deadly chase. Meanwhile, in the engine room of the Serenity's Hope, Captain Morrison crouched behind a damaged control console with the few dozen survivors still under his protection. The ship's hull groaned and creaked around them as Vraken boarding parties searched through the upper decks. Are those our ships out there? Whispered a young woman holding a terrified child. Morrison peered through a small porthole at the battle raging outside. He could see the familiar blue and white hulls of human warships exchanging fire with the dark Vraken vessels. Yes, he said quietly. That's the Third Fleet. They came for us. "Will they be able to stop them?" asked an elderly man whose arm was in a makeshift sling. Morrison honestly didn't know. The Vraken had overwhelmed his ship's defenses in minutes, and they seemed to have a significant numerical advantage. But he had heard stories about the Third Fleet. They were humanity's most experienced combat unit, veterans of a dozen major engagements with hostile alien species. A new sound echoed through the ship's corridors, the heavy footsteps of Vraken soldiers moving through the deck above them. The reptilian aliens were methodically searching every compartment, looking for any humans who might be hiding. "Everyone stay quiet," Morrison whispered. "And stay low." Back in the main battle, the tide was beginning to turn in humanity's favor. The superior training and coordination of the human crews was showing. The destroyer Valkyrie had managed to disable a Vraken cruiser with a precise strike to its reactor core, while the Phoenix was systematically destroying the weapon systems of another enemy ship. But losses were mounting on both sides. The human cruiser Defender was barely holding together, its hull breached in 17 places. 2 Vraken destroyers had been completely destroyed, their wreckage adding to the debris field around the civilian liner. The Retribution was closing distance with the enemy command ship when the Vraken vessel suddenly opened fire. The alien flagship's weapons were unlike anything the humans had faced before, coherent energy beams that seemed to bend space itself around them. "Incoming weapon fire, unknown type," the tactical officer warned. The beams struck the Retribution's shields and passed right through them as if they weren't there. Alarm screamed across the bridge as the exotic energy tore through the ship's outer hull layers. "What the hell was that?" Chen demanded as the ship shuddered around them. "Some kind of phase weapon," the science officer replied, his face pale. "It's designed to bypass conventional shielding. Damage to decks 7 through 12, but our main systems are intact." Chen gritted her teeth. The Vraken had been holding back their best technology, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. But 2 could play that game. Tactical, prepare the mass driver cannon. Full power. The mass driver was the Retribution's most powerful weapon, a magnetic acceleration system that could launch a dense metal slug at a significant percentage of light speed. It consumed enormous amounts of energy and took time to charge, but its destructive power was unmatched. "Mass driver charging," the tactical officer confirmed. 40 seconds to full power. The Vraken command ship fired again, its phase beams carving new wounds in the human dreadnought's hull. But the Retribution continued its approach, absorbing the punishment while its most devastating weapon prepared to fire. Around them, the smaller ships of both fleets continued their deadly dance. The human destroyer Interceptor rammed a damaged Vraken cruiser, both ships disappearing in a brilliant explosion that lit up half the nebula. It was a desperate tactic, but it removed a significant threat from the battle. "Mass driver ready to fire," announced the tactical officer. "Target their engine section," Chen ordered. "One shot, one kill." The magnetic coils along the Retribution's spine discharged with a sound like thunder. The metal projectile shot forward at tremendous velocity, crossing the distance to the enemy flagship in less than a second. It struck the Vraken ship's rear quarter with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The enemy command ship's entire aft section simply vaporized. Secondary explosions rippled through its hull as power systems overloaded and fuel tanks detonated. The massive vessel began to list badly, losing power and attitude control. "Direct hit," the tactical officer shouted. "The command ship is dead in space." But even as their flagship died around them, the Vraken crew wasn't finished. A boarding shuttle detached from the crippled vessel and accelerated toward the Serenity's Hope. If they couldn't escape with the entire passenger liner, they would at least try to capture some prisoners. "Helm, intercept that shuttle," Chen ordered. "Use the point defense systems." The Retribution's smaller weapons tracked the fleeing Vraken craft. Streams of hypervelocity rounds reached out across space, some missing but others finding their target. The alien shuttle's shields failed under the barrage, and the small craft broke apart in a shower of debris. With their command ship disabled and several other vessels destroyed or damaged, the remaining Vraken forces began to retreat. Their ships turned away from the battle, accelerating toward the edge of the nebula where they could safely enter hyperspace. "Let them go," Chen said when her tactical officer asked for permission to pursue. "Our priority is the civilians." As the sounds of battle faded, rescue teams from the human fleet began boarding the damaged Serenity's Hope. They found Captain Morrison and his survivors still hiding in the engine room, scared but alive. Other teams spread throughout the ship, searching for any passengers who might have survived the initial attack. The news was mixed. Of the 300 people originally aboard the civilian vessel, only 112 were found alive. The Vraken had killed many during their initial assault, while others had been taken to the alien ships before the rescue arrived. But more than 100 families would be reunited because the Third Fleet had answered their distress call. "Ma'am," Commander Williams approached Chen as she watched the rescue operations from the bridge. "We're receiving priority communications from Fleet Command. They want a full report on the engagement." Chen nodded absently. She was thinking about the passengers who hadn't made it, the ones who had died before help could reach them. Every successful rescue mission seemed to be balanced by tragedy, but she knew her crews had done everything humanly possible. "Tell Fleet Command we encountered a Vraken slaving operation," she said finally. "We engaged and drove off the enemy force, but with significant casualties among the civilian population. Full casualty reports to follow." As the Third Fleet prepared to escort the damaged liner to the nearest human outpost, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning of something larger. The Vraken had been operating deep in neutral space with sophisticated new weapons. They were planning something, and humanity needed to be ready for whatever came next. 3 days after the battle in the Kepler Nebula, the Third Fleet arrived at Garrison Station, a massive human outpost on the edge of civilized space. The station's medical facilities worked around the clock to treat the survivors from the Serenity's Hope, while intelligence officers debriefed everyone who had witnessed the Vraken attack. Commander Chen stood in the station's main briefing room, facing a holographic projection of Admiral Harrison, the commanding officer of human naval operations. The Admiral's weathered face showed the strain of coordinating humanity's defense across dozens of star systems. "Commander, your report makes for disturbing reading," Admiral Harrison said. "Phase weapons, new ship designs, coordinated slaving operations in neutral space. The Vraken are clearly preparing for something significant." "Yes, sir," Chen replied. "The prisoners we recovered described seeing dozens of other captured ships during their brief time aboard the enemy vessels. Civilian transports, merchant vessels, even some military escorts that had gone missing over the past few months. Intelligence estimates suggest the Vraken have taken over 3,000 human prisoners in recent raids," the Admiral continued. "That's more than they usually capture in an entire year. We need to know what they're planning." Chen had been thinking about the same thing since the battle. The Vraken were aggressive and territorial, but they usually operated in small groups, taking targets of opportunity. The coordinated fleet she had encountered suggested a much larger operation in the works. "Sir, I'd like permission to take the Third Fleet deeper into Vraken space," she said. "If they're massing forces or building something, we need to find it before they're ready to use it." Admiral Harrison was quiet for a long moment, considering the request. "Commander, what you're suggesting is essentially a reconnaissance in force behind enemy lines. The risks would be enormous." "The risks of not knowing what they're planning could be even worse, sir." The Admiral nodded slowly. "Very well, Commander. You have authorization to conduct a limited reconnaissance mission. But I want regular check-ins every 12 hours, and if you encounter anything you can't handle, you retreat immediately. We cannot afford to lose the Third Fleet." "Understood, sir. We'll depart as soon as repairs are completed." After the Admiral's image faded, Chen walked to the briefing room's large viewport. Garrison Station orbited a barren world, but beyond it lay thousands of star systems, many of them controlled by hostile alien species. Somewhere out there, the Vraken were preparing something that could threaten all of human space. Down in the station's medical bay, Dr. Sarah Kim was finishing her examination of the rescued passengers. As the Third Fleet's chief medical officer, she had seen her share of trauma cases, but the survivors from the Serenity's Hope were among the worst she had encountered. "Doctor, could I speak with you for a moment?" Captain Morrison approached her station. The civilian ship captain had insisted on staying with his surviving passengers rather than accepting immediate transport back to human core worlds. "Of course, Captain. How are you feeling?" "Physically, I'm fine," Morrison replied. "But I can't stop thinking about what I saw aboard that Vraken command ship. Before they moved us to separate holding areas, I got a glimpse of their main prisoner bay." Dr. Kim set down her tablet and gave the man her full attention. "What did you see?" "Hundreds of humans, Doctor. Maybe 1,000. All in these cells. But it wasn't just random people. I saw uniforms, military personnel, ship officers, even what looked like civilian government officials. The doctor frowned. That information hadn't been in any of the initial reports. Are you certain about what you saw? I'm certain. And there's something else. The Vraken guards were talking about something called the Great Hunt. They seemed excited about it, like it was some kind of celebration. Dr. Kim made notes on her tablet as Morrison spoke. This intelligence needed to reach Commander Chen immediately. If the Vraken were specifically targeting human leadership and military personnel, it suggested a much more sophisticated operation than simple slave raids. Meanwhile, in the station's intelligence section, Lieutenant Commander Jackson was analyzing the wreckage and debris recovered from the destroyed Vraken ships. The human fleet had managed to salvage several intact computer cores and weapon components before departing the battle site. "Sir, you need to see this," his analysis team leader, Petty Officer Chen, called out from across the room. Jackson walked over to the holographic display where the team was examining Vraken data crystals. The alien writing scrolled across the screen in incomprehensible patterns, but the universal translator was slowly making progress. "What am I looking at?" Jackson asked. "Deployment orders, sir. The fleet we encountered was just one of 12 similar formations. They've been hitting targets across a front that spans over 50 light-years." Jackson felt his blood run cold. 12 fleets of that size represented a massive military operation. What's their objective? Still working on that, sir. But there are references to something called the Gathering and coordinates for a rendezvous point in the Veil Nebula. The Veil Nebula was deep in Vraken space, nearly 200 light-years from the nearest human outpost. If the aliens were gathering their forces there, it would be almost impossible for human intelligence to monitor the situation. "Copy all of this data and get it to Commander Chen immediately," Jackson ordered. "She needs to know what we're dealing with." Several hours later, Chen sat in her ready room aboard the Retribution, reviewing the intelligence reports that had come in from the station. The picture they painted was alarming. The Vraken weren't just conducting random raids, they were executing a carefully planned campaign with specific objectives. A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called out. Commander Williams stepped into the room, his face grim. "Ma'am, we've received word from Fleet Command. 3 more civilian ships have gone missing in the past 48 hours. All were taken in coordinated attacks by superior forces." Chen set down the intelligence report and rubbed her temples. The situation was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. "Any word on survivors?" "Negative, ma'am. But long-range sensors detected multiple Vraken ships departing each attack site. They're definitely taking prisoners, not just destroying the vessels." "How long until we're ready to depart?" "Engineering says another 6 hours for repairs to be completed. All other ships are ready to go." Chen stood and walked to the viewport in her ready room. The stars seemed distant and cold, offering no comfort for the decisions she had to make. Somewhere out there, thousands of humans were being held captive by an enemy that viewed them as nothing more than livestock. Commander Williams signaled the fleet. "We depart in 4 hours, whether repairs are finished or not. Every minute we delay means more people suffer." "Yes, ma'am." "And our destination?" Chen turned back to face her executive officer. "The Veil Nebula. We're going to find out what the Vraken are really planning." As word of their departure spread through the fleet, the crews of the Third Fleet began their final preparations. Weapons were checked and rechecked, defensive systems calibrated, and emergency supplies loaded. Everyone understood they were heading into the most dangerous mission of their careers. In the Retribution's hangar bay, Marine Colonel Sarah Torres briefed her assault teams. The Marines were humanity's elite ground forces, specially trained for boarding operations and hostile environment combat. "Listen up," Torres addressed the assembled soldiers. "Intelligence suggests we may encounter large-scale prisoner facilities wherever we're going. If we find human captives, extraction is our top priority. These people have been through hell, and we're going to bring them home." The Marines checked their equipment one final time: advanced armor suits, plasma rifles, and portable shield generators. If they had to fight their way through Vraken ships to rescue prisoners, they would be ready. Captain Angela Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Defender, watching her crew repair the damage from the recent battle. Her ship had taken a severe beating, but her engineers had worked miracles to get it spaceworthy again. She wouldn't miss this mission for anything. "Ma'am, engineering reports all critical systems are operational," her executive officer informed her. "We're not at 100%, but we can fight." "That's all I need to hear," Rodriguez replied. "Signal the flagship that the Defender is ready for departure." Across the fleet, similar scenes played out as each ship prepared for what could be their final mission. The crews understood the odds they faced. The Vraken were gathering their strength deep in hostile territory, and humanity's third fleet was sailing directly into the heart of enemy space with only 12 ships. But they also understood what was at stake. Thousands of human prisoners were counting on them, and the security of all human space might depend on stopping whatever the Vraken were planning before it was too late. Commander Chen returned to the bridge as the final preparations were completed. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency, each person focused on their duties but aware of the magnitude of their mission. "All ships report ready for departure," the communications officer announced. "Helm, set course for the Vale Nebula," Chen ordered. "Maximum sustainable speed." As the Third Fleet departed Garrison Station, they left behind the safety of human space and headed into the unknown. Behind them, families waited for news of missing loved ones, while ahead lay the most dangerous enemy humanity had ever faced. The stars wheeled past as the fleet entered hyperspace, carrying them toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of thousands of prisoners and, possibly, the future of human civilization itself. In the depths of enemy territory, the Vraken were preparing for something they called the Great Hunt, and humanity's deadliest fleet was the only thing standing in their way. The race against time had begun, and failure was not an option. Too many lives hung in the balance, and the Third Fleet had never failed to answer when their people called for help. They would not start now, no matter what horrors waited for them in the darkness between the stars. The Vale Nebula stretched across space like a wound in reality itself. Purple and crimson gases swirled in impossible patterns, shot through with veins of silver energy that defied conventional physics. It was beautiful and terrifying, a place where normal spacetime seemed to bend and twist according to unknown laws. Commander Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as her fleet emerged from hyperspace at the nebula's edge. Long-range sensors immediately began detecting massive energy signatures deep within the gas clouds, confirming their worst fears. "Ma'am, I'm reading multiple large structures approximately 50 light-minutes into the nebula," reported Ensign Brooks from the sensor station. "Energy output suggests significant industrial activity." "Any ship movements?" Chen asked. "Difficult to say with all the interference, but I think I'm detecting patrol patterns." "Definitely organized traffic." Chen nodded grimly. Whatever the Vraken were building here, they were taking security seriously. "Signal the fleet to maintain formation and proceed at half impulse." Full stealth protocols. The Third Fleet moved deeper into the nebula like ghosts, their ship's emissions dampened to barely detectable levels. The swirling gases provided excellent cover, but they also made navigation treacherous. Gravitational anomalies could crush a ship without warning, while energy discharges could overload even military-grade shielding. 2 hours into the nebula, they found what they were looking for. Through the gas clouds ahead, massive structures began to resolve on their sensors. What they saw defied belief. "My God," breathed Commander Williams from beside Chen's chair. "It's enormous." The Vraken had built a vast industrial complex in the heart of the nebula. Massive stations connected by kilometer-long transport tubes formed a network that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Ships came and went from dozens of docking bays, while mining platforms harvested exotic materials from the nebula's energy fields. But it was the central structure that drew everyone's attention. A colossal ring-shaped station, easily 50 kilometers in diameter, hung in the center of the complex. Energy coursed through its structure in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Analysis, what am I looking at?" Chen demanded. The science officer worked frantically at his console. "Ma'am, I believe it's some kind of dimensional gateway." The energy patterns match theoretical models for artificial wormhole generation, but on a scale we never imagined possible. "A gateway to where?" "Unknown, ma'am. But the power requirements would be enormous." "That's probably why they've been raiding our shipping. They need human slaves to operate their mining platforms and power generation facilities." Chen felt sick. Thousands of human prisoners were being worked to death to build a weapon that could threaten all of known space. She had to know more. Can we get closer without being detected? There's a sensor blind spot created by the gravitational distortions near the main structure, the navigation officer reported. We could probably get a small ship within scanning range. Prep a stealth reconnaissance probe, Chen ordered. I want detailed scans of that facility and any prisoner areas you can identify. While the probe was being prepared, the fleet held position in the nebula's outer reaches. The crews watched in fascination and horror as more details of the Vrakan operation became clear. Hundreds of ships came and went from the complex, many of them carrying what appeared to be captured vessels from various species. The reconnaissance probe launched 30 minutes later, its advanced stealth systems making it virtually invisible to conventional sensors. It moved slowly through the gas clouds, recording everything it encountered. The images it transmitted back were shocking. Massive slave barracks housed thousands of prisoners from dozens of different species. Humans were the most numerous, but Chen could see representatives from every major civilization in their region of the galaxy. The conditions were appalling: cramped cells, minimal life support, and guards that treated the prisoners like animals. There, Williams pointed at a section of the display. That looks like a command structure. If we're going to get them out, we need to take out their coordination center first. Chen studied the tactical situation. The Vrakan had superior numbers and the advantage of fighting in their own territory. But they had made one critical mistake: they had concentrated their forces and their prisoners in one location. If the Third Fleet could punch through their defenses quickly enough, they might be able to cause enough chaos to mount a rescue operation. All ships, this is Retribution, she broadcast on a secure channel. We're looking at the largest concentration of human prisoners ever assembled. We cannot walk away from this. Attack Plan Charlie 7. We go in fast, hit their command structure, and extract as many prisoners as possible before retreating. Captain Rodriguez of the Defender was the first to respond. Acknowledged, Retribution. My ship is ready. One by one, the other vessels confirmed their readiness. The crews of the Third Fleet understood they were about to attempt the impossible: a frontal assault against a fortified enemy position while trying to rescue thousands of prisoners. The odds of success were minimal, but the alternative was unthinkable. All ships, attack formation, Chen ordered. Let's show these monsters what happens when they take our people. The Third Fleet emerged from the nebula's gas clouds like avenging angels. Their sudden appearance caught the Vrakan patrols by surprise, and the first wave of enemy ships was destroyed before they could sound an alarm. But the complex's defenses activated quickly. Weapon platforms built into the industrial stations began firing, filling space with deadly plasma bolts and exotic energy beams. Dozens of Vrakan warships launched from hidden bays, moving to intercept the human attackers. The Retribution led the assault, its massive guns pounding the enemy defensive positions. The Dreadnought's armor absorbed tremendous punishment as it pushed deeper into the complex, clearing the way for the smaller ships to follow. Phoenix and Valkyrie, target those weapon platforms, Chen commanded. Everyone else, concentrate on the command structure. The battle was unlike anything the fleet had experienced before. The Vrakan fought with desperate fury, knowing that defeat would mean the loss of their greatest project. Their ships threw themselves at the human vessels with reckless abandon, trading their lives for time. But the Third Fleet fought with something more powerful than desperation: they fought with righteous anger. Every crew member understood that somewhere in those prison barracks, human beings were suffering and dying. That knowledge drove them to extraordinary acts of courage and skill. The destroyer Interceptor made a suicide run at the main defensive grid, overloading its reactor and ramming a critical power station. The explosion knocked out primary defenses for an entire section of the complex, allowing the Retribution to penetrate to the command center. Marine teams, launch now. Chen ordered. Get to those prisoner areas and start evacuation procedures. Marine assault shuttles shot out from the human ships, their pilots weaving through defensive fire to reach the slave barracks. Colonel Torres led the first wave, her teams equipped with portable teleportation devices that could beam prisoners directly to the fleet's ships. The fighting inside the complex was brutal. Vrakan guards were killing prisoners rather than allowing them to be rescued, forcing the Marines to fight their way through heavily defended positions. But humanity's elite soldiers were trained for exactly this type of operation, and they pushed forward with grim determination. Commander, we're taking heavy casualties, reported Colonel Torres over the comm system. But we've reached the primary detention area. Beginning evacuation now. Streams of light began appearing throughout the fleet as prisoners were teleported to safety. Humans, but also members of dozens of other species who had been captured during the Vraken raids. Many were in terrible condition, but they were alive. The battle reached its climax when the Retribution finally penetrated to the central ring structure. Chen's suspicions were confirmed. It was indeed a massive gateway device, and it was almost ready for activation. "Science officer, can we destroy it?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am, but the explosion would probably take out half the complex, including any prisoners we haven't evacuated yet." Chen was faced with an impossible choice. Destroy the gateway and save the galaxy from whatever the Vraken had planned, or continue the rescue operation and risk allowing the weapon to be completed. The decision was made for her when long-range sensors detected massive Vraken reinforcements approaching the nebula. A fleet of over 100 enemy ships was racing toward their location, drawn by the distress calls from the complex. "All ships, prepare for immediate withdrawal," Chen ordered. "We have incoming hostiles, estimated arrival in 20 minutes. "Ma'am, we've only evacuated about half the prisoners," Colonel Torres reported. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders. "Continue evacuation for 15 more minutes, then, all teams return to the ships. We cannot risk the entire fleet." The final phase of the rescue operation was a desperate race against time. Marine teams worked frantically to reach the remaining prisoner areas while the fleet's ships held off increasingly desperate Vraken counterattacks. The Defender took critical damage when 3 enemy cruisers concentrated their fire on its wounded hull, but Captain Rodriguez kept her ship fighting until the very end. "Evacuation complete," Torres finally reported. "All teams returning to ships. All vessels, full withdrawal," Chen commanded. Emergency jump to hyperspace in 60 seconds. As the Third Fleet prepared to flee, Chen made one final decision. She ordered the Retribution's most powerful weapon to target the central gateway structure. The mass driver fired at maximum power, its projectile striking the alien device at the moment the fleet jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, the Veil Nebula erupted in an explosion of exotic energy as the gateway collapsed catastrophically. The blast consumed the entire Vraken complex and much of the surrounding gas cloud, creating a new star visible from hundreds of light-years away. The Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace in neutral space, their ships battered but victorious. In their holds, over 3,000 prisoners from dozens of species began the long journey back to freedom. Among them were nearly 1,800 humans who had been given up for dead. Commander Chen stood in the medical bay, watching as Dr. Kim and her teams worked to treat the rescued prisoners. Many would need extensive rehabilitation, but they were alive. They had been saved from a fate worse than death, and they would see their families again. "Ma'am," Commander Williams approached her. "Admiral Harrison wants a full report when we reach Earth." "Tell the Admiral that the Vraken threat has been eliminated," Chen replied. "Their secret weapon is destroyed, and we've dealt their military capabilities a crippling blow. It will be years before they can mount another major offensive." Williams nodded and walked away, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. The Third Fleet had earned its reputation once again, proving that humanity would never abandon its people, no matter the odds. In a galaxy full of predators and monsters, the human race had shown that compassion and courage were their greatest weapons. As the fleet set course for home, carrying their precious cargo of rescued prisoners, Chen reflected on what they had accomplished. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, not through superior firepower or technology, but through the simple human refusal to leave anyone behind. The stars ahead held unknown dangers and challenges, but Chen was confident that humanity would face them with the same determination they had shown in the Veil Nebula. For when the call came and people were in danger, humanity's deadliest fleet would always respond.